had a conversation about what they would do. You're so holy. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to look out on you. I'll just be on my own here, just sort of confessing that I have ruminated about £1 million actually these days. You're going to buy yourself a nice pad on the moor, maybe. I'm speaking for myself. A little bit of land. That's 750, 900 grand already. Seriously, £1 million's not that much, is it? I'm going to want, I don't know, how much millions? What would you do if you won £10 million? Have you ever had one of these conversations? We used to have this conversation at work. People say, oh, I'd really love to win the lottery, but I wouldn't want to win sort of 90 million because that's unnecessary, isn't it? Yeah, and there's sort of virtue in that. I would definitely settle for more like 10. 90 is unnecessary, but 10 I'd be happy with. I'd definitely be happy with 10 million. So I wonder, Ollie, the bottom line is I just hate talking about money. Is it okay to be honest with you? I feel like this is cathartic for me. This is, in fact, my small group, actually. It's just an opportunity to share with you guys. And Ollie, I was talking to Ollie, and I said, Ollie, do you know what? I just hate talking about money. I think it's something about my upbringing. It's about my background. I've just brought up that it's vulgar to talk about money with people. And so Ollie, because he loves me, he said, oh, well, you should do a talk about money then next time we're doing a Giving Sunday. So thank you, Ollie. I love you. So we're going to have a go at this, and you're going to have to be gracious to me because it's a sensitive subject, isn't it? We're going to try and navigate it a little bit, but there's a couple of things. Of course, we can talk about what we would do with money, but what we're here for is to hope to hear something from God's Word, isn't it? And find out whether God has got any thoughts in His Word about what we should do with money and our approach to money. So that's what we're going to try and navigate. But before we do that, let's just say a prayer. Should we just bow our heads for a moment? Holy Spirit, thank you that you are here. Would you move amongst your people? Would you do your work, not ours? Would you speak your words into hearts, not mine? May my words nevertheless be honorable to you and bring glory to your name, Jesus. Amen. So a couple of simple thoughts about money. The first is beware money. Beware money. I think it's going to come up on the screen. Jesus says to his disciples, you cannot serve God and mammon is like a Syrian god of money, and they use this term a lot to describe a lust for money, a passion for money. And Jesus says you cannot serve God and mammon. It's interesting that he says serve God as well. We're a bit uncomfortable with serving God. We want to sort of be friends with God or loved by God, but God obviously wants us to serve him, and he says, well, you can't have it both ways. See, the thing about mammon, thing about money and a lust for money is that it has a spiritual power. This is the first point. Money has a spiritual power. That means that it's not like morally neutral, like bread. Bread is morally neutral. What I mean by that is that you can eat bread and that's all good, or you can hit someone over the head with a baguette. You can do something good with bread or not with bread, and it's not the bread's fault. If you're beating people with a baguette, it's your fault. It's not the bread's fault. But something different happens with money. Money's an unusual thing because it has a power all of its own. Money has the ability to change your heart, to change your relationship to itself, and an impact on how you'll then behave and relate to other people. Money has this weird thing where in some ways it can act like a deity in itself, and this is why it can become an idol for us. Because money gives us power, because money gives us freedom. It can give us a sense of stability. It starts to have a controlling power over us. Now, the two greatest commandments that Jesus talks about is love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, soul, and mind. But if you're loving him with all of your heart, strength, soul, and mind, you can't be doing that with money at the same time. And so Jesus is saying, which one has got your affection? The second greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. And if you're worrying about money and trying to resource more money and gain money from people and sell stuff and buy stuff and cheat people out of money and defraud people and try and get as much as you can to make yourself stable, you're not loving your neighbor. Because we're called to look to the neighbor and see how they're getting on with money. I don't know how many of you, this morning, very few actually, but I'm hoping that there's at least one person here who's been watching a bit of Bear Grylls, because I absolutely love Bear. Anybody a fan of Bear Grylls? Literally just me and one guy at the back. Oh, there's a few. There's confidence is building. Come on, it's okay. I'm not going to ridicule you. I love Bear Grylls. He used to be the face of Alpha. He's just a fantastic Christian guy and an explorer, and I like to see his shows. And he used to have a series of shows called The Island, and I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's a good show. And basically, it's a reality TV show. And they get sort of 12 contestants, and they take them to a desert island, and they've got to learn to survive, and they've got to work together as a team, and there's literally nothing there for them. They've got to sort of find water. There's like puddles, and then they've got to boil water to make it okay to drink, and they've got to find their own food, whether they can catch a bird or a fish or a manta ray. It's not great for vegetarians, actually. There's quite a lot of bloodthirsty eating and stuff. And they've got to prepare it themselves, and they've got to sort of just knit together. And the idea is, can they survive for 5 weeks? So this has gone for ages, and there's something, I don't know about you, but there's something very comforting about sitting in your lounge on an evening and watching people suffer on an island. So that's how I spend my time. Anyway, it had a new iteration. That's Ollie's word. It only just has happened. It sort of finished on Channel 4 a few weeks ago. Did anybody watch Treasure Island with Bear Grylls? Let's have a quick show of hands. Treasure Island, not a single one. Yet a couple. Great guys. I'll speak later. We've got a bond already. It's beautiful. Okay, for those of you that have got more things to do, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I'm going to just describe it in great length now, and we'll go through this. I think there was about 12 episodes. I'll take you through them. There's no need to worry about the fact that you haven't seen it. So what they thought they'd do is they'd change it. They still get the 12 people for 5 weeks, but now they're going to take a helicopter, and every now and then the helicopter's going to fly over the island, and they're going to drop a crate, and this crate's going to have certain sums of money in it. And if they see this and find it, they can open the crate and get the money. And this will have values from like £10,000 to £30,000, and it's quite an exciting thing. Up to, the whole time while they're staying there, they're going to get £100,000. And basically the idea is that anything you find, you can have, providing you survive the 5 weeks. You survive the 5 weeks, you can take that money away with you. Now, it's a huge challenge for people to survive on the island, so they have to work together. So when this team came together, they were like, yeah, we're going to work really well together, and we're going to get this money, and we'll share it, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. So they quickly divided up the roles, and 2 guys, a guy called Marco, who was an ex-Marine, very, very tough. People like Marco. They were like, you're a legend. And he's like, because that's what Marines are like, isn't it? And no, maybe not. I think it is. No? No. No. And then there's Ivor, and he's like a Lord Mountbatten, and he was sort of... He'd got sort of an amazing pad, and he was looking after this estate and all of this thing, and he was slightly less and more. And these guys said, we'll do the food duty. We'll go and try and find an animal and stuff. And they're tearing through the jungle trying to find it when Marco spots one of these crates and gets very, very excited. Now, Ivor specifically has said, it's okay because I'm going to share stuff. It's beautiful, isn't it? But Marco's like, stuff everybody else. I don't even know who they are. I've never met them before. This is for me. And then Ivor goes, what a great idea. We'll keep it secret, and from now on, we'll collect this money. So from now on, they went out every day. Nobody else went out looking for the food or trying to catch the animals, because these guys were saying, we'll get the food, and then they'd go looking for these crates, and they'd collect more and more money, and they'd hide it. And then there was 3 girls. I'm going to go on and on about this. It's great. Ollie said that I'm allowed to talk about my favorite TV shows if I want to. So these 3 girls went out, and 2 of them were turning one way, and one of them turned the other way to try and find something, some fruit or food or something. And 2 of them found some money, and the other girl was literally over here, and they were like, don't tell her. This will just be our money. We'll keep it to ourselves. One of those girls, when she was back at the camp, she got guilty. Guilt started to arrive. She started to get stressed, and she was like, I can't do it. I can't do it because these guys are being nice, and they're all helping, and I can't. So she said, I'm going to confess. So she confessed that she took this money, and the other girl was upset and angry, and now there was upset between them. Do you remember this? It was awful. And the other guys, so this sort of opened the idea that some people might be hiding money. So they're like, is anybody else hiding money? And then the guys had to say, well, yeah, we've been hiding money too. And why shouldn't we? And I forgot to tell you about Irene. I mean, she's 75. What's she doing there? She obviously got to this stage in her life where she thought, like, I haven't been on a desert island, I haven't tried to survive yet, I'll do that, it'd be fun. But she's so old, no offense if you're 75, you could be a young 75 like Ollie. But she can't go out into, there's no point in her trying to get through the jungle, it's really difficult for her, so she spends her time sort of like looking after the camp, and she Actually, do you know what? The majority of the food was actually found by Irene and her friend who was like in her 50s. And they would go and collect these really gross snails and stuff, and they basically had snail soup most of the time. She provided the food that these guys ate, but they said, it's not our fault that you're too old to go and get the stuff for yourself and can't beat us to get to these crates. We're going to do it ourselves. And the whole community started to turn in on itself. Thank goodness there was a guy called Jack. There's only 2 more characters, it's going to be okay. Jack, in his 20s, a plumber, he's like, this is awful. What is wrong with you guys? Life is about more than money. It's about community. We've got to work together. These guys have been a massive help to me. They've given me food. They've comforted me when I was getting stressed about being on this island. So they basically were starving themselves to death because these other guys never found any food. I mean, in every other series, they've made this beautiful camp and they've got systems. These guys kept coming back with absolutely, oh, sorry, couldn't find anything. And of course they had. And Jack's like, no. And he's going to promise. So he went and found some money and he started dividing it out. They actually had the notes and he started handing it out. Everyone was like, you're a beautiful guy. And they started really rallying around him. Marco went from this butch, rah, everybody thinks he's awesome, to feeling slightly out of the crowd because they were like, why would you do that? Why have you got that attitude like that? And finally, there was Ben, who was in his 20s as well. And he was like a bit of a character as a salesman, a bit of a lad. And he was like, I'm definitely going to keep all money to myself. And then finally, he went through this little conversion experience. And he was like, I can see what's happening with Jack and what's happening with the community. And actually, there's more to life than just me. And he started to say, no, I'm going to help Jack. And he went out with Jack and found some money and they shared it out. And it was an amazing thing. It was like this whole story of what can happen when money consumes people. And obviously the producers knew that and thought it'd be entertaining. The second verse that we've got here, beware money, is that the love of money, this is Paul writing to Timothy, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Guilt and violence and coveting and struggle and jealousy. All of these things, sometimes you can look below them and find that actually at the root of that is this passion for money. I've got to have more money. When is enough money going to be enough money? It can have a power over you. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, actually, God's never sent a helicopter for me with a big crate of money, so I've not had to worry about this. But I've had to think through thinking about this talk. What does it mean to be wealthy? Are you wealthy, Reuben? What would it take for you to be wealthy? I took some pleasure, there you go, I mean, God have mercy on me. There's the confession right there. I took some pleasure in telling a couple of people when I changed my job role that I'd taken this slash in my salary as though that was some honorable thing, and now I'm not wealthy. And yet the truth is, if you've got a smartphone here tonight, you're wealthy. In the terms of the world, even the terms of this country, but particularly the world, you're a wealthy person. If you've got a laptop or a tablet, if you have got Netflix at home, if you've ever ordered a taxi or you get an Uber Eats or whatever else, you're wealthy as far as the statistics of wealth. I mean, you might be feeling stressed about that, and I realize some of us are more wealthy than others in this congregation, but the reality is, when will we be able to say, I think actually, yeah, I might be rich? I think I might be challenged to say, well, what would I do with the money that I've been given or the privilege or the opportunities that I've got? It's challenging, isn't it? We have to think that the power that money can have over us. It might be worth thinking about who you could speak to. And my wife's away, which is good, so I can talk about her. And if I'm honest, sometimes I'm in a service and I get stirred by the Holy Spirit to invest, to put a little bit more money towards God's work and His kingdom and the building of His kingdom, and a little less money to the 7th cappuccino that week that was a little bit overpriced. And I get prompted by this, but the barrier that stops me is that I find it profoundly stressful to talk about money, as I've already said, and particularly because Portia and I, we have completely different attitudes to money. And some of you will be in situations like this where you've got family members or partners, spouses that you're like, whoa, I don't want to talk about money. It always ends up in warfare. And actually, I've used that as an excuse not to attend to what the Holy Spirit was stirring in my heart. We need to honor God, and we need to take it to prayer, and I need to ask for help from friends and say, how am I going to navigate this subject? And how am I going to navigate this subject for myself? Sometimes there's something about asking, has money got a power over you? And what does that look like? And asking people that care about you. And then confession. Lord, I'm sorry. I think I've let money take a control over me such that it's destroyed or impacted on my effectiveness for you or my relationships with other people. And then thinking about generosity and what giving might look like in the back of that. So the first thing is beware money. It's not as benign as a bread baguette. The second thing is hooray money. It's not all bad, is it? It's been well said that you don't solve poverty by becoming poor. You don't help someone who's poor by becoming poor yourself. It may be that you've been an incredible steward of your money, and that's why you've got money. It may be that God has just blessed you in a particular way with particular gifts. Maybe you've worked incredibly hard and you've earned this money. And we've got this verse here about Barnabas in the early church. He's one of the guys in the early church. He's actually called Joseph, but they like to rename people. And he was such a huge encouragement. They were like, well, Barnabas means encouragement, so we'll call you that. And he sold a field he owned, thank you, and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. Money can be used for the kingdom of God. We can use the blessings that we've got to further the kingdom and further the impact that we want to make on the city for God and for his purposes. And this is critically important. I found myself at like a New Wine conference, and they were talking about what you could do, what difference you could make in the world if people were willing to give something of their earnings to people, to this project. And I thought, I don't know, I give quite a bit of money anyway, and I don't know whether that's for me. And then I left and I went and got a cappuccino. As you can tell, I'm faintly obsessed with cappuccinos, but I went and got a cappuccino, and they were like, oh, that's £3 something. And I was like, oh, that's quite expensive. And then I didn't give it another thought, and I just paid for it anyway. And it was only afterwards that I thought, wow, I'm really mixed in my emotions about how I handle my own money. But our money can be used in powerful ways. I won't be able to remember the times when I've just splurged and treated myself. I don't know whether you do this. I'm a little bit stressed. I better buy something. I'm a little bit happy. Time to buy something. I'm sort of in the middle. Should I buy something? Maybe I will. It's Tuesday. I'll buy something. That'll make me feel good. I like you. I should buy you something. And presumably, you'll buy me something straight back. Just putting that out there in case you were wondering. There's this whole seesaw approach that goes with how we spend our money, but these things aren't the ones that stick in my mind. The things that stick in my mind are the investments that I've been able to make, I've been prompted to make, that have made a real difference to people. It's a privilege to be able to do that. In the church community that I was in before, there was a couple, they were youth workers. They'd stepped into that, feeling that they had a passion for youth, just like these guys up here, and they wanted them to know something about the love of Jesus. And their car broke down, and because of the sacrifices they'd made to step into this ministry, they couldn't really afford it, and that became profoundly stressful for them. Bruce and I were like, well, the money they needed was, does it sound coarse? I think it does, but it's the reality of where we're living. It didn't mean that much to us. We can do that. We could give that money. It's not a big deal. And we were able to bless them, and they were so encouraged that they were able to carry on what they felt that God was calling them into. Another girl was wanting to get into ministry and go on a ministry course and couldn't afford it, and it was easy for us to do. I had a job that paid reasonably, and actually now when we saw the change that she's been making and the impact that she's had on other people's lives, it's exciting because we were like, well, we were able to contribute to that, and we were able to bless that. We loved her. We could see Jesus all over her. Whenever she said, we had family prayers there where you sort of, different people, we may bring this in. Every single person gets to pray one prayer at the, no, let's not do it. I prefer this like collective, we're all together. Don't worry, I'm changing nothing. I'm scared now. Anyway, we would hear her pray, and her faith was so alive, and it was such a privilege to be able to invest into that. I don't know if you know about the Dalit Support UK. So have you heard of the Dalits? It's like the lowest, hand up if you've heard the Dalits. Is it just literally, oh, come on, good. So good. So the Dalits are like the lowest caste in India. They're hugely oppressed people. And young girls from the age of 5 can be dedicated to a goddess. They become a yogini and ultimately become temple prostitutes. It's absolutely shocking. That's happening in the world even now, in the world that we celebrate as civilized. And this is something that you can actually, your money can make a difference for. You can actually turn stuff around by investing in these sorts of things. It's been our privilege to be a part of this family and to invest in St. Matt's. We give what's called a tithe, a traditional tithe. I mean, and we can discuss the pros and cons of that. There's different theologies, although heads up, if you want to have a discussion, you're thinking, yeah, I know there's different approaches to that, and you're feeling relieved. And by the way, tithing is traditionally giving 10%, the first 10% of your income to the work of God. And we can sort of discuss, there are different theological positions on that, but don't get too comfortable, because the foremost position that tithing is no longer relevant is that Jesus actually asked for all of you, not 10%. So some of us might be better just sticking with the tithing 10% thing, I think probably. You'll notice that it says the first fruits. We're not to insult God with what's left over when we've bought everything that suits us. We're supposed to give him the first because he's given to us. I heard this someone say, the question is not how much of my money should I give to God? The question is, how much of God's money should I keep for myself? We need to get a different perspective on what it means that we hold these treasures. Jesus says, don't build treasures on earth, build it in heaven. And we wonder, well, what is this treasure in heaven? Well, there's people in heaven, and we invest in people here. We'll see that treasure in heaven. It's my privilege to, almost every week, we have the privilege of seeing people raise their hands. I mean, we're not looking, are we? Hopefully no one's looking at that point when we close our eyes and someone lifts their hand and says, I want to start life with Jesus. But almost every week, people in this community will raise a hand and say, I'm ready. Isn't it exciting that we're in a community that does that? Well, I feel privileged because I feel like that's something that I've invested in. That's something that we've contributed to. People like the lights that we've got here. It's easy to invite people. I don't know how many people you've invited, but this is a church that likes to invite. In our survey, people had invited between 1 and 4 people in 1 year. It's amazing. Other churches, they might invite someone once a decade. People like the lights. They like the music. They like the coffee that we've got. They like the donuts, the stuff that we've got at the back. And I take some pleasure in that because I say, actually, that's part of my family. I've contributed to that. When people have been away from church and their faith has gone dry, or they've been hurt by other churches and they start coming back in here and their faith comes alive and they're making a difference for Jesus in their communities and their workplaces and their neighborhoods, I take some pleasure in that because I say this is what we're investing in together. This church supports compassion, and I'd heard about compassion fleetingly before. But they pushed compassion here, and if I'm honest, and unfortunately I have spotted Mark, and I love you, Mark, but I'm having a real honesty thing here. I hope this won't become a feature, otherwise you'll find out too much about me. But the reality is that I'd heard about compassion in the past, and I thought, well, this is compassion is sponsoring children throughout the world who are in destitute situations. And I thought, really? Is my money really going to make that much of a difference? I'm really looking to do something exciting with my money, something powerful, something that's going to be world-changing. So I'm going to keep my money for the moment and do absolutely nothing with it. And actually coming here and hearing more about compassion and hearing some of the testimonies from people whose lives had been changed by sponsorship really started to spoke to us. And I thought, what does it mean to be a part of this community that says we are passionate about this organization, Compassion? So we sponsored a child because actually it really didn't take that much to reorganize some of our priorities to be able to do that. And now, unbeknownst to me, we're on this journey of connecting with this little boy called Delali and bringing hope and a future to him. We're just playing a tiny part. The organization's doing the rest. But it does matter, Reuben. It does matter that this one life has hope and a future in a way that I take for granted. And that's been life-changing. And I've really enjoyed the dynamic in our family as we've taken it a turn to write an encouragement and a hey, how you doing to Delali. More locally, this church also supports routinely, gives a proportion of your offerings to Shekinah and Trevi and the Sunflower Project. And I don't know if you know anything about the Sunflower Project. They're particularly working with women in the city who found themselves in difficult circumstances. It's profoundly important work. It's one of the only places in the entire country that does this work. And Laura Fraser-Cruz, who comes to this community, she's high up in this organization. And if you've ever met her, she's a very passionate, gifted lady. And I had to ask myself, what would someone like that be able to do with my money? If your gift is in some other form, some other avenue of work, but actually someone else's gift is unbelievable in ministry and making a difference in the city, and you're like, I want to see more of your kingdom come, we can work together and see a difference and see a change. We're in different categories here, aren't we? Some of you are regular givers already, and we thank you. And it may be that you're actually being stirred to think of, what would a one-off gift, what difference might that make to this community? We did a survey, and actually quite a lot of you hate our toilets, sorry. But it's true, a lot of you had a real moan about the loos. Actually, rather than the bubbling costs of this community, with a one-off gift, with a one-off push, we can make an early change on that. Others of you are bothered about the sound that's going on in the youth room and the upper hall, and it's quite loud, and it's quite difficult. There's so many kids there, and we're like, we're celebrating that. We've got more kids in our church community engaging with the story of Jesus and the life change that he brings than pretty much any other church in I'm going to say the world. No, I'm going to say Devon. I'm not sure. I was looking at you. You weren't helping me. I just went world. I went ridiculous. Sorry. But anyway, we're really pleased about what God's doing here. But a one-off gift, a big push from us, we could make a quick difference so that they have a better and more useful space. There's other things that we can be doing. Some of you haven't yet engaged in regular giving, and all I would encourage you to do is to start now, thinking about what that might mean, whether it's here, whether it's also in terms of Christian charities in a broader scale. All I'd say to you from my own experience is, don't wait until you're earning enough, because you never will. Jesus says it's a matter of the heart. It's not a matter of your purse. Martin Luther said there's 3 conversions that need to happen. Your head, your heart, and your purse. It's funny, isn't it? All those hundreds of years ago, and they still had the same problems. Maybe Jesus' words still apply today. Guys, we can take this city. One of the reasons I was excited to come and work with you guys in the church here and have the privilege of learning under Ollie was the fact that you guys weren't going, yay, we're here. You guys were like, yay, this is where we're going. We're going somewhere. We've not arrived. The expectation that God is still alive and is going to do something amazing. And if we all play our part, we're going to see more and more and more of his kingdom. And that's worth it, I think. Shall we stand?